Here's a truth that'll shake you. The exact moment you prove you're willing to walk away without drama, without anger, just quiet certainty, everything changes in how she sees you. And brother, most men never figure this out. They think leaving is about winning some battle or making her suffer. Dead wrong. Walking away is about something far more powerful. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that you refuse to negotiate it. Because here's what nobody tells you. Attraction doesn't feed on desperation. It thrives on unshakable self-respect. Think about it. When you demonstrate that you're not emotionally imprisoned by one specific outcome, the entire relationship dynamic transforms. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself. And that shift, that's what commands attention. That's what generates genuine respect. Most guys approach relationships like they're holding onto a rope. The more they feel it slipping, the tighter they squeeze. Knuckles white, palms bleeding. They convince themselves that grip equals commitment, that suffering equals love. But here's the reality, that rope burns both ways. And the woman on the other end? She feels that desperation in every interaction. She feels it when you text twice before she responds once. She feels it when you apologize for things you didn't do wrong. She feels it when your entire mood depends on whether she smiled at you that morning. And what does that desperation communicate? Simple. That you need her more than you need yourself. Now flip the script. Imagine a man who communicates clearly, who shows up consistently, who brings value without keeping score. But the moment he senses genuine disrespect or consistent half-effort, he doesn't argue, doesn't plead, doesn't write essays about his feelings. He just steps back, calmly, quietly, with his dignity fully intact. What does that communicate? Everything. It says he has options even if he doesn't parade them. It says he has standards that aren't up for debate. It says he'd rather be alone than disrespected. And most importantly, it says his happiness doesn't hinge on her approval. That's the energy shift women can't ignore. Because suddenly you're not the guy who'll accept anything just to keep her around. You're the guy who chose her but will unchoose her if necessary. There's no neediness in that position. No weakness. Just strength wrapped in composure. And here's what's wild. This isn't about being cold or withholding affection. You can care deeply and still have boundaries. You can want her and still value yourself more. Those aren't contradictions. They're requirements. Because the man who loses himself trying to keep someone else never keeps them anyway. He just delays the inevitable while destroying his self-respect in the process. The moment you prove you can leave is the moment you stop being optional. Here's where most men destroy their own relationships. The second they feel her pulling back, they grip harder. The double texts start flowing. The paragraphs explaining their feelings multiply. The need to fix everything immediately takes over. And look, the intention isn't bad, it's fear. Raw fear of losing something valuable. Fear of being replaced. Fear of not measuring up. But here's the brutal paradox you need to understand. The harder you chase someone who's creating distance, the faster your attraction value drops. Not because showing you care makes you weak, but because desperate pursuit screams imbalance. And imbalance destroys respect faster than almost anything else. Watch what happens when a man senses distance. He starts analyzing every word she said 3 days ago. He replays conversations looking for where he went wrong. He crafts the perfect text message, deletes it, rewrites it 5 times. He asks his friends what they think. He checks if she viewed his story. He becomes a detective investigating his own relationship. And while he's doing all this, she's living her life. Going to the gym. Hanging with friends. Not thinking about him nearly as much as he's thinking about her. That gap. That's the imbalance. And she feels it even if she can't name it. Respect in romantic dynamics connects directly to emotional composure. When you panic, when you react without thinking, when you abandon your own boundaries to prevent loss, you're unconsciously broadcasting that the relationship owns more power than your self-worth. The moment that flip happens, the polarity collapses. She might not consciously think, "I've lost respect for him," but she feels it. Attraction fades when a man forgets his own value while begging for hers. Here's what kills relationships silently: overfunctioning. You start doing emotional labor for 2 people. You manage her moods. You compensate for her lack of effort with extra effort. You become the relationship's cruise director, constantly planning, pursuing, initiating. And you tell yourself it's because you care more. But that's not care. That's compensation. You're trying to earn something that should be given freely. Every time you over-pursue, you're teaching her that your attention has no price, that your time has no value, that your presence requires no reciprocity. You become emotional wallpaper. Always there. Never appreciated. Just expected. And the saddest part? You think you're showing love, but you're actually showing fear. Fear that if you stop performing, she'll leave. Fear that if you stop chasing, she'll forget you exist. Fear that you're not enough without the constant effort. But women don't fall in love with effort. They fall in love with presence. Grounded, self-assured presence. The kind that doesn't need validation to feel solid. The kind that doesn't crumble when she has a bad day or needs space. The tighter you grip, the less there is to hold on to. Walking away correctly isn't game playing. It's alignment with your standards. If you've communicated with clarity, if you've shown consistent effort, if you've been solid, and you're still being tested, dismissed, or half-chosen, leaving becomes the only honest response. It declares, I value myself too much to beg for what should be freely given. That energy hits different than anger. It's not coldness. It's composure. And composure carries serious power. Listen closely. There's a massive difference between a man who leaves in a rage and a man who leaves in peace. The angry exit is about her. It's reactive. It's trying to hurt her the way she hurt you. But the peaceful exit? That's about you. It's proactive. It's protecting your standards regardless of her response. One seeks revenge. The other seeks alignment. One burns bridges. The other simply stops crossing them. Women can feel this distinction immediately. The dramatic exit makes you look unstable. The calm exit makes you look unshakable. What women respond to isn't the distance itself. It's the self-possession. A man who can step back without creating chaos demonstrates emotional regulation. He shows he's not operating from fear. And fearlessness in relationships? That's rare currency. Think about the men she's dated before. How many of them could handle tension without losing their minds? How many stayed composed when she pulled back? How many had the strength to walk away from disrespect without turning it into a 3-hour argument? Probably none. Most men either explode or implode. They fight or they freeze. But they don't flow. When you don't crumble under pressure, don't spiral when uncertainty appears, don't chase validation when tension rises, you become grounded. Grounded men feel stable. Stable men feel safe. And safety is deeply, powerfully attractive. But here's what safety actually means in this context. It's not about being harmless. It's not about being predictable in a boring way. It's about being emotionally reliable. She knows you won't have a meltdown over small things. She knows you won't need constant reassurance. She knows you can handle your own emotions without making them her responsibility. That reliability is magnetic because most people are emotional tornadoes. They swing from high to low based on external circumstances. Their mood depends on who texted them back. Their confidence depends on who validated them today. They're reactive, not responsive. But a man who can calmly exit when necessary shows something rare. He shows that his emotional state isn't hostage to her behavior. He can witness her distance without drowning in insecurity. He can experience her tests without performing like a circus animal. He can feel the sting of disrespect without retaliating like a child. That's not emotional suppression. That's emotional mastery. And mastery in any form is attractive because it's evidence of internal work. It proves you've done the hard inner labor that most men avoid their entire lives. Composure isn't what you show. It's who you are. Here's the layer most men completely miss. When someone senses you won't tolerate disrespect or confusion indefinitely, they recalibrate how they treat you. Boundaries create clarity. If you stay present while being undervalued, you're teaching that inconsistency is acceptable. But when you withdraw calmly without theatrics, you interrupt the pattern. And that interruption forces reflection. This isn't about manipulating someone into missing you. It's about demonstrating that your presence isn't guaranteed. Humans value what feels earned. When you make yourself endlessly available regardless of treatment, your presence becomes background noise. And predictability without appreciation breeds complacency. Look at how this plays out in real time. She cancels plans last minute. You say it's fine. She does it again. You say you understand. Third time happens. You make a joke about it. What are you teaching her? That your time is flexible. That your schedule bends to her convenience. That there's no consequence to treating your availability casually. Now imagine a different response. First time she cancels, you're gracious. Second time, you're honest about how it feels. Third time, you don't reschedule. You don't get angry. You just stop initiating plans. You redirect that energy elsewhere. No lecture. No guilt trip. Just natural consequence. Walking away resets that complacency. It reintroduces consequence, not as punishment but as reality. Because here's the truth about boundaries, they're not threats. They're information. When you say, I won't accept X, you're not trying to control her behavior. You're informing her of yours. What she does with that information is her choice. But what you do when she crosses it, that's yours. Most men announce boundaries but don't enforce them. They say what they won't tolerate, then tolerate it anyway. They draw lines in sand and let them get washed away repeatedly. And every time they do, their words lose currency. She learns that his boundaries are suggestions, not standards. What makes this challenging is that it demands internal security. You can't fake detachment. If you walk away secretly hoping she panics and chases, your energy won't feel steady. Real detachment comes from knowing you'll be fine regardless of outcome. That's not arrogance. That's independence. And independence is magnetic because it removes pressure from the entire dynamic. Think about relationships where you felt pursued versus ones where you did the pursuing. In the ones where you were chased, you felt relaxed. You didn't obsess. You didn't overanalyze. You just responded when you felt like it. Now flip it. When you're the one pursuing, every interaction feels weighted. Every response time matters. Every word choice gets scrutinized. That's the difference independence creates. When you genuinely don't need a specific outcome, you stop performing. You stop auditioning. You just exist as yourself, and she either appreciates that or she doesn't. But either way, you remain whole. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're standards that determine who gets to stay in. There's a psychological principle operating beneath the surface that most people never acknowledge. Certainty destroys urgency. When someone feels absolutely certain you're not going anywhere, they relax. And relaxation isn't inherently bad, but in attraction dynamics, too much certainty without appreciation dulls intensity. When you're always available, regardless of how you're treated, your presence becomes elevator music. The moment you step away calmly, that music stops. And silence is deafening. Here's how this works in practice. You're always the one who reaches out first. Always the one planning dates. Always the one checking in. She never has to wonder where you are or what you're doing because you've made yourself completely transparent. Completely accessible. Completely predictable. And predictability feels safe, sure. But it doesn't create attraction. Attraction requires some degree of uncertainty. Not games. Not manipulation. Just the natural uncertainty that comes from dealing with someone who has their own life, their own priorities, their own boundaries. Absence forces evaluation. When you're constantly present, people rarely reflect on your value. You're just there, accessible, predictable, expected. But when you remove yourself without hostility, without chaos, without trying to wound her emotionally, you create space for thought. And thought creates clarity. She starts replaying your consistency, your composure, your steadiness. She begins comparing the emotional stability you provided with the instability that might follow. Think about anything you've ever taken for granted. Your health when you're young. Your parents when they're alive. A job before you lose it. You don't appreciate these things because they're always there. They're background. But the moment they're threatened or removed, suddenly you see their value with crystal clarity. This is where men get it twisted. They think walking away creates jealousy. It doesn't. Jealousy is temporary. Respect is permanent. Respect forms when someone recognizes you operate from standards rather than emotion. If you leave because you're angry, it feels reactive. If you leave because you're grounded, it feels intentional. And intentional action carries weight. Consider the emotional math. When you're always pursuing, you're signaling lower value. Not because pursuit is weak, but because one-sided pursuit is. It suggests you need her more than she needs you. That you're willing to work harder for her attention than she works for yours. That imbalance registers subconsciously. But when you step back, the math changes. Suddenly she's wondering why you're not texting. Where your attention went. Whether you're talking to someone else. Not because you're playing games, but because you genuinely redirected your energy toward things that reciprocate it. That shift creates natural tension. And tension isn't negative. Tension is the space between where you are and where you want to be. It's what makes stories compelling. It's what makes music interesting. It's what keeps attraction alive. Remove all tension and you remove all polarity. Everything flattens into comfortable boredom. Certainty without effort equals complacency. And complacency is where desire goes to die. One of the most misunderstood realities. Sometimes value isn't recognized in presence. It's recognized in absence. When you're consistently available, consistently forgiving, consistently accommodating, your effort blends into the background. It becomes expected. And expectations kill appreciation. But once you remove yourself with dignity, the contrast becomes visible. The emotional stability you brought, the patience, the consistency, those qualities become easier to feel when they're gone. This doesn't mean women only value what they lose. It means human nature recognizes stability when it's removed. When you step away without hostility, it disrupts the emotional rhythm. The predictable cycle breaks and disruption creates awareness. She may not admit it immediately, pride delays acknowledgement, but internally, comparison begins. She evaluates what she had versus what she experiences next. Here's what happens in that space. She goes out with friends and they complain about their dramatic boyfriends. She realizes you never created drama. She talks to other guys and notices they're either too aggressive or too passive. She remembers you were balanced. She deals with someone flaky and recalls you always followed through. These aren't conscious comparisons at first. They're feelings. A vague sense that something's missing. A recognition that what she had was actually rare. Not perfect but solid. Not exciting in a chaotic way but stable in a powerful way. There's also something about a man who can endure silence without chasing that shifts perception. Silence tests internal strength. Most men feel compelled to fill the void, to text, explain, clarify. But the man who can sit with uncertainty without emotionally collapsing communicates resilience. And resilience feels powerful because it suggests long-term steadiness, not short-term emotion. Think about how most breakups or conflicts go. The man can't handle the silence. 3 days in he's reaching out. Asking if they can talk. Apologizing for things he's not even sure he did wrong. Basically volunteering to take blame just to restore connection. But what does that communicate? That he can't handle discomfort. That silence scares him more than compromising himself. That his need for resolution outweighs his need for respect. Now contrast that with a man who can let weeks pass without breaking. Not out of spite. Not keeping score. Just genuinely busy living his life, processing his thoughts, maintaining his standards. That communicates something entirely different. It says he's not controlled by emotional urgency. That he can be uncomfortable without making it everyone else's problem. Over time, walking away correctly reshapes how future interactions unfold. If she re-engages, the tone changes. There's less testing, less ambiguity because she understands that inconsistency has consequence, not punitive consequence, but natural consequence. And when natural consequence becomes part of the dynamic, respect stabilizes. She learns your absence is real, not performative. That when you step back, you genuinely step back. And that reality recalibrates how she shows up. Absence doesn't make the heart grow fonder. It makes the mind grow clearer. Here's the critical distinction that separates authentic strength from manipulation. Walking away only commands respect when it's genuine. If you leave hoping she panics, if you withdraw to trigger anxiety, if you're timing your silence like a chess move, that energy leaks. It feels manipulative. And manipulation doesn't build respect. It builds resentment. Real detachment is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't monitor reactions. It simply chooses alignment. Some men confuse fear with respect. If she becomes anxious when you pull back, that doesn't automatically mean she respects you. Anxiety can be about control, about ego, about disruption of routine. Respect is different. Respect shows up as changed behavior, as consistency, as accountability. If someone returns with the same patterns intact, your absence didn't build respect. It just created temporary discomfort. The power of walking away lies in what it reveals, not what it forces. It reveals whether she values your presence beyond convenience. It reveals whether effort is mutual. It reveals whether your boundaries matter. Pay attention to what happens when you create space. Does she reflect and return different? Or does she return exactly the same, expecting you to just be grateful she came back? One indicates growth. The other indicates entitlement. Long term, this principle reshapes how you enter relationships from the beginning. You become less eager to overinvest early. You allow consistency to unfold naturally. You observe how she handles small moments of tension. You pay attention to whether respect exists without constant reminders. Walking away teaches you to assess rather than chase. And here's what most men don't realize until later. The ability to walk away changes everything about how you date. You stop treating every woman like she's your last option. You stop overlooking red flags because you're scared to be alone. You stop negotiating with people who should be volunteering enthusiasm. Here's the paradox. The more comfortable you become with walking away, the less often you actually need to. Because when your boundaries are clear from the start, people treat you differently. You don't tolerate mixed signals early. You don't entertain half-effort. And when expectations are communicated calmly, alignment happens faster. Think about men you know who have options. Not players. Just men who genuinely have healthy relationships available to them. Notice how they move. They're not desperate. They're not aggressive. They're just clear. They know what they want. They express it without apology. And when someone doesn't meet that standard, they move on without bitterness. That's not coldness. That's clarity. And clarity is kind because it doesn't waste anyone's time. In the end, women don't respect men who walk away because they left. They respect men who walk away because they can. Because it signals independence. Because it signals standards. Because it signals emotional mastery. And emotional mastery isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about governing them. The man who can choose distance without bitterness communicates something rare. He values connection, but he values himself more. And that balance is where respect lives permanently. Here's the critical distinction that separates authentic strength from manipulation. Walking away only commands respect when it's genuine. If you leave hoping she panics, if you withdraw to trigger anxiety, if you're timing your silence like a chess move, that energy leaks. It feels manipulative. And manipulation doesn't build respect. It builds resentment. Real detachment is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't monitor reactions. It simply chooses alignment. Some men confuse fear with respect. If she becomes anxious when you pull back, that doesn't automatically mean she respects you. Anxiety can be about control, about ego, about disruption of routine. Respect is different. Respect shows up as changed behavior, as consistency, as accountability. If someone returns with the same patterns intact, your absence didn't build respect. It just created temporary discomfort. The power of walking away lies in what it reveals, not what it forces. It reveals whether she values your presence beyond convenience. It reveals whether effort is mutual. It reveals whether your boundaries matter. Pay attention to what happens when you create space. Does she reflect and return different? Or does she return exactly the same, expecting you to just be grateful she came back? One indicates growth. The other indicates entitlement. Long term, this principle reshapes how you enter relationships from the beginning. You become less eager to overinvest early. You allow consistency to unfold naturally. You observe how she handles small moments of tension. You pay attention to whether respect exists without constant reminders. Walking away teaches you to assess rather than chase. And here's what most men don't realize until later. The ability to walk away changes everything about how you date. You stop treating every woman like she's your last option. You stop overlooking red flags because you're scared to be alone. You stop negotiating with people who should be volunteering enthusiasm. Here's the paradox. The more comfortable you become with walking away, the less often you actually need to. Because when your boundaries are clear from the start, people treat you differently. You don't tolerate mixed signals early. You don't entertain half-effort. And when expectations are communicated calmly, alignment happens faster. Think about men you know who have options. Not players. Just men who genuinely have healthy relationships available to them. Notice how they move. They're not desperate. They're not aggressive. They're just clear. They know what they want. They express it without apology. And when someone doesn't meet that standard, they move on without bitterness. That's not coldness. That's clarity. And clarity is kind because it doesn't waste anyone's time. In the end, women don't respect men who walk away because they left. They respect men who walk away because they can. Because it signals independence. Because it signals standards. Because it signals emotional mastery. And emotional mastery isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about governing them. The man who can choose distance without bitterness communicates something rare. He values connection, but he values himself more. And that balance is where respect lives permanently. If this resonated with you, subscribe. There's more truth coming that most men never hear.